I hope everyone is having a wonderful Wednesday and thank you so much for joining us today. Can everyone hear me? I saw a quick thing in the chat about audio. Oh, oh no. Is it better now? All right, fantastic. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Simone Yap, and I am a second year student at Northeastern University School of Law, one of the national board members at large for the National Black Law Students Association, and your moderator for today. It is a pleasure to have you all in this space as we engage in very important conversation. Today's event, Detraumatizing Our Bodies, Minds, and Heart. This will be a conversation about race, policing, and mindfulness. This conversation is a part of the NBLSA and the Mindfulness and Law Society's anti-racism series. Our program is going to feature an acknowledgement of the lives that we have lost, a discussion led by Professor Donald Tibbs, mindfulness exercises guided by Ms. Bella Dilworth, and a closing question and answer period. I would now like to introduce Ms. Bella Dilworth. Ms. Dilworth is a graduate of the University of Southern California Annenberg School of Communications and Journalism and the University of Southern California Goethe School of Law. She's an active member of the California Bar and recently retired as a senior trial attorney from the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office. As a deputy public defender for 32 years, Ms. Dilworth represented indigent clients charged with everything from cockfighting in the city of Compton to capital homicide and theft of giant cargo containers from the Port of Los Angeles. Ms. Dilworth trained and supervised attorneys in the Juvenile Services Division and participated in restorative justice projects for clients with mental health diagnoses and controlled substance addictions. As an integral part of Ms. Dilworth's daily legal practice, it included litigating excessive use of force by the police, improperly obtained and executed search warrants, and false confessions, and the overarching issues of law enforcement credibility. Outside of the law, Ms. Dilworth has been practicing yoga meditation since 1995 and has been a mindfulness student and practitioner since 2015. Now introducing our second speaker today, I would like to introduce Dr. Donald Tibbs. Dr. Tibbs is a professor of law at the St. Thomas University School of Law. At the St. Thomas University School of Law, he teaches criminal law, criminal procedure, and special topics in critical race theory, race and the law, and hip hop and the law. Previously, he has taught at the Thomas R. Klein School of Law at Drexel University, Arizona State University, University of North Carolina, and the Southern University Law Center, where he was an assistant professor of law and the director of the Institute for Arts and Justice. Dr. Tibbs received his JD from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Following law school, he worked as a civil rights and criminal defense attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina. He obtained his Doctor of Philosophy from Arizona State University in the School of Justice and Social Inquiry, where he emphasized race in the law and legal history and pop culture. Following his doctoral studies, in 2012, he taught the first course on hip hop and the law ever offered at an American law school. During this course, scholars traveled from all around the world to discuss the intersection of hip hop and the law with law students. His research interests generally include race and the law, formed through his knowledge of African American legal history, crime and punishment, critical race theory in hip hop and pop culture. He's the author of From Black Power to Prison Power, The Making of Jones v. North Carolina Prisoners Labor Union, which examines law, Black Power, and the prisoners' rights movement from the 1960s to the 1980s. We have two phenomenal speakers today, and I'm just so excited for the conversation that we're going to have. Before I hand it over to Dr. Tibbs, I would just like to take a moment of silence to honor all the lives that we have lost. So just please take a minute to observe this time with me. Thank you all so much. Dr. Tibbs, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see everyone. Thank you so much to Simone and Nabalsa for inviting me to be a part of today's event. And special thanks to my good friend Chapin Semino for also reaching out to me and inviting me to come today and to talk to you about mindfulness in the context of race and policing in America. I'm also very excited to share the stage with Bella Dilworth. She's a superstar. I'm not so sure I even deserve to be on this stage with her, but I'm certainly happy to join her and help lead today's conversation. Um, I thought a lot about recently. I thought recently a lot about what's the best way to approach thinking about the traumatizing aspects of race and policing that we are currently experiencing today. Um, and I remember when I thought I'd share sort of my own personal journey, and hopefully it will connect very well with how we think about race and policing in this country. When I began as a law professor, who everyone understands, one of the things you often have to do is sort of choose a subject area within which you will be conducting your research. And one of my very first projects that I worked on was an article related to the Jenna 6 trial down in Jenna, Louisiana, which made a lot of sense because I was actually a professor in Louisiana at that particular time. And this case involved primarily the police using not the police using force, but the prosecution using its discretion to punish some young Black men who had gotten into a school fight over the fact that some of the white students had hung a noose at the school under what claimed to be the white only tree. And this was in 1998 when this occurred. So I'm sorry, actually 2008 when this occurred. So the prosecution sort of used its discretion as a result of this. It turned into a school fight, and the young men were charged with not only attempted homicide in the school fight. This is just a regular fight, attempted homicide in a school fight, but also assault with a deadly weapon. And the prosecution claimed that the deadly weapon were the gym shoes that these young men had on because they were kicking some of the white students. It was in that moment that I had some real exposure to the ways in which race and policing were occurring in our contemporary society. Prior to this, my own experience as a law student involved the choking death, actually, of a motorist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, while I was in law school. That was very reminiscent of what happened to George Floyd. And then, of course, as an African American young man growing up in Detroit, Michigan, I also had my own personal experiences with the police officers, which at one point involved and included them actually placing a gun to my head and threatening to blow my head off for talking back to them. All of these experiences that we start to have really brings some connection to us that sort of reminds particularly people of color and Black people and brown people in particular the ways in which race and policing happens and occurs in this country. And it's sometimes a little bit difficult to talk about the law in a context of being something that can actually heal this problem when in fact the law makes a contribution to the problem in the very first place. And so as I continued in my career as a legal scholar, I started doing more and writing more and more articles on and more scholarship on race and policing in these contexts. And it got to such a point where the deaths of Black people, particularly Black men, were happening at such a fast pace that I couldn't even keep up with it. And I think that I know that some of you are also experiencing some of that today, right? When in the moment that we're actually trying Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, while the trial is going on, the police in the same city shoot and kill Daunte Wright. So the speed and the ways at which Black death is occurring at the hands of policing in this country contemporarily bring us all to a really bring us to a pause where we have to understand that every time that we either witness a death on television or we witness it in our social media feeds, that we ourselves are experiencing trauma, right? We ourselves are going through an actual traumatic event, and particularly in the ways in which we engage our news sources, which now include often news occurring all day long, just never having a stop, never having a break from it. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is what can I do to better heal myself so that I am more careful and conscious of my own spirit? What can I do to make sure that as I take in these really traumatic moments, that I am at the same time taking care of my own soul and taking care of the souls of the people who are around me? And I guess it got me to think, well, maybe I'm just talking about mindfulness, right? Like, in what ways am I actually being mindful of the way in which not only the deaths of Black people are occurring at a rapid pace in this country at the hands of policing, but then also how am I internalizing that and then obviously projecting it back out? I certainly noticed with myself over time a couple of things, a couple of my own experiences. One, I find myself really exhausted, right? Not only with sort of continuously witnessing these unexplainable events, but then I exhaust myself even more when I try to explain unexplainable events, particularly to people who aren't interested in hearing my version of the explanation, right? Those people who are really beholden to alternative facts, those people who are really beholden to not understanding what racism is, those people who are beholden to talking points that rely and pander on anti-Blackness, on racism. I'm over here working hard to create a better society while you have other people on the other side who are fighting against that. And the exhausting part of it, at least for me, has been to how to stay in the game, right? How to stay in the game, how not to just give up and say, I can't do this anymore. And I honestly have had some of those moments where I felt like I just don't know how good this is, how healthy, mentally healthy this is for me to sort of stay within these moments. And I've actually had some moments where I found myself saying, gee, man, I wish I was just like a biz orgs professor or something like that, where I don't spend every single day talking about these things over and over again. And of course, understanding that when these events occur, right, the news requests come in, the opportunities to speak, all of the opportunities to talk to faculty and lead forum. And in those moments, it is a reliving of the trauma. And I've even had conversations with some of my students, and for those students who are on the line, you will understand exactly what I'm talking about, which is you find yourself trying to explain the easily explainable to people who don't want to accept that it's easily explainable. And sometimes this utter resistance is just there, and it's so incredibly exhausting. It's so incredibly debilitating. So, what can we do to recognize and to create a better world for ourselves, right? Because I deserve to be happy in this world also, right? I don't deserve to actually exist for someone else who is miserable, who doesn't want to accept the effects. I deserve to have a right to happiness as well, even in the context of doing my job and also being very protective of my own mental health. Well, the more difficult part of it, I think, at least from the perspective from which I think about some of these events, is that they're not new, right? These events are not new. They're not contemporary. They're deeply historical. And oftentimes it's the deep historiography of anti-Blackness that cuts through the American version of life in this country that plays against our morality and also challenges the idea that this country is in and of itself as great as it thinks it is. This sort of new version of Americanism and patriotism that is arising is really occurring and reoccurring old themes of anti-Blackness that have been here since the institution of slavery. And it's really difficult when you wake up and you when you look at a news feed and you see, for example, that a Louisiana congressman is trying to propose a way to talk about the good of slavery in the classroom, and that is, it flies in the face of everything that is historical in this country. And it fails to acknowledge who African American and brown people and Asian people and Muslim people, and let's extend it more, and trans people and LGBTQ, like it extends into a place where those communities are not receiving the type of acknowledgement for the not only micro but macro aggressions that occur every single day. It's gotten to a point now where there's a fear. I have friends that reach out to me that say, hey man, I'm afraid to drive my car. I'm afraid to get pulled over by the police because they're either shooting you after you tell them you're a licensed gun owner, you have a permit, as in the case of Philando Castile, or they're shooting you in the back while you're trying to get into the car. They're shooting 7 bullets into your back as you try to avoid an altercation with the police, or they're shooting you in your car while you're trying to avoid, once again, an altercation with the police, and they're claiming that it is a mistake. They're rushing into your homes with no-knock warrants and killing you inside of your house. They're even appearing inside of your house and shooting you and claiming self-defense, and they're actually in the wrong apartment that they think is theirs. These are the sort of stories. I'm not really getting into naming all the names, but these are the stories that are constantly occurring. And the question becomes one of, what can we do? How do we acknowledge the past, represent the past, stay connected to the past without creating these sort of massive violations and traumatizing effects into our own life? And when you think about having moments where you don't want to be involved anymore, you want to give up, you take a moment and you stop and you say, well, what if Martin Luther King Jr. had felt that way, right? Which I'm sure he did. What if Malcolm X had felt that way, right? What if Cinque on the Amistad had felt that way? I'm sure that in these moments where we wish we can, throw our hands up. I think it was Marvin Gaye that says, makes me want to throw my hands up, holler, right? And have these moments and these experiences. What do we do? How do we stay connected? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we make valid, good, healthy choices in our own life to deal and talk about policing and race in this country? Well, first we have to make, in my opinion, we have to make a couple of acknowledgments. Number one, as I've said before, this is not new. It's just more visible, right? It's not new, it's just more visible. What do I mean by that? That since the advent of technology, cell phones, cameras, there's an ability to record these events in real time, even the body cam footage for police officers. So we really have to understand we're not addressing something new, we're addressing something that has been hidden for a very long time, except for the people who are the victims of this racialized policing and brutality in the country. The other thing that I think we have to also recognize is that we have to be cautious of how we let our foot off of the pedal. What do I mean by that? In the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, it really dawned on me, and I talk about this in one of my more recent articles, that during the pandemic, When we were essentially a lockdown country, if everyone can go back into your memory banks with me for a moment, when we were locked down and we were essentially a lockdown country, Black people were not dying at the hands of the police. We were actually safe, right? There was no deaths, there were no killings because Black people weren't out among the police force. The police were still out there. There was no one to police because no one could go anywhere, but we were safe. We were in our homes. And then as we slowly started to open the doors and as we slowly started to open up society, we started to see killings happening right away. Right, you saw Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, right? You saw George Floyd. Like all of those three happened in succession as soon as we came out of the pandemic. And so it was so incredibly inspiring to see the world, right, speak out against this anti-Black violence occurring at the hands of police. The the movement for Black Lives Matters, right? The people that joined in all around the world, not just in the United States in every city, but also all around the world. It was really inspiring for a moment to watch that. And we go into the recent trial for Derek Chauvin, right? And we gain a conviction in that case, and there's a massive celebration. And I just want to, I want to just, I don't want to say not celebrate, not be happy for the outcome, but just understand. And I think the way that I was thinking about it as the prosecutors were patting themselves on the back and everyone was high-fiving and dapping each other up, I was saying to myself, well, this one was easy, right? This one was easy. This one shouldn't have been difficult. What is there to celebrate? This one should not have been. This was one of the easiest cases to win in terms of a prosecutor, right? So as we're patting ourselves, as they're patting themselves on the back and saying, "This is great, right? This is an amazing thing that we did." Yes, we did, but we still don't have justice in Breonna Taylor. And you killed Daunte Wright before this could occur. And we still don't know what's going to be the end result for Ahmaud Arbery, right? And the deaths are continuing to occur and roll out. And it's not just that you win the easy cases. Black America wants you to also win the difficult ones. We want the prosecutors to stand up for us as citizens in this country too. Vis-a-vis the 14th Amendment, when slavery ended versus in the 13th Amendment with the Reconstruction Amendment statutes, the 14th Amendment granted everybody citizenship's rights who were born in this country. That included to the free slaves who could no longer be held in slavery under the 13th Amendment. So that means that many of us were born into citizenship ever since the end of the Civil War in 1865. But why is it in 2021 we're still experiencing these moments of feeling as if the Constitution doesn't apply to us? I too have Fourth Amendment rights against the police officers. I too have Second Amendment rights if I wanted to own weapons. I don't, but if I wanted to, I'm certainly authorized to do so under the Fourth Amendment. But for some strange reason, Black people get deconstitutionalized, right? Treated as if the Constitution doesn't apply to us, right? A great inquiry that we've seen this happens to be in the Trayvon Martin case in George Zimmerman, right? George Zimmerman said that he was standing his ground. But what about Trayvon Martin? Doesn't he too have the right to stand his ground as well? It's just treated as if there has to be some sort of Black compliance to police authority, such that if you don't, then it's the opportunity for the police to not only act out their violence, which they do. I call it acting out and acting up, right? But then on the back end of acting out that violence, there's zero accountability. And even when there should be accountability, there's all these legal measures that are in place to protect police officers. They have different use of force statutes than the average citizen does. They're whisked away before they can be questioned for a crime. They're given access to their union representatives and their attorneys who can help them shape the narrative of what happened so that it sounds like they didn't do anything wrong. Long before they are even questioned by the police officers, they're placed on limited duty, right? They get to keep their jobs. Even if they're fired, they get to keep their salaries. Get to keep their pensions. Their homes are never at risk. Their financial money in their accounts are never at risk. And then at the end of that, when they lose their job in one police department, they'll cross the county line and get hired in another, right? And on top of that, the police departments are doing nothing in terms of these internal complaints. They see these people. Derek Chauvin, this is not new for Chauvin. He had already committed these types of crimes in the past. And so it's good to see that Merrick Garland is going in to do investigations of the police department in Minneapolis. And I just encourage that many, many more should be done, right? Because for some strange reason, I imagine that if we were to send the DOJ into every police department in this country, we would find a great deal of abnormalities, right? We would find a great deal of constitutional violations over and over and over again. So that's sort of a backdrop for thinking about how law is intersecting with our humanity as people of color, with our humanity as a nation, and what can we then do to help deal with this traumatizing and re-traumatizing aspects over and over and over again. I think I'll stop right there. I
No,
can get a little preachy.
but it's so necessary to feel invigorated and have that passion when discussing this topic, because it is very easy to get activist fatigue, especially when not only having to champion our own causes, but also feeling the pressures of others expecting us to champion their causes as well. And as you pointed out, we continue to see the recurring themes of anti-Blackness that have existed since slavery. As we continue our fight for equity and equality, our fight has attempted to be snuffed out, as we see now the rise of more than 40 protesting bills across the nation since the 2020 summer protests, and that directly speaks to the deconstitutionalizing of Black people in this country. We have the right of lawful assembly, and we have the right to protest, but now because of the topic that's being advocated for and led by the masses, now must be silenced. So we really have to pay attention to what is happening in our world, and with paying attention to those aspects, we still have to emphasize those good and healthy choices that you were talking about, and figuring out how to de-traumatize ourselves when engaging in this type of work as well as these conversations. And so in that same essence, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Dilworth to lead us through our first mindfulness exercise.
Okay.
Well, I was kind of ready for this because I knew any conversation of this way, you're right, is very activating. I don't think it takes much to activate us. So just before I get into, I don't know so much if it's an exercise, but an explanation, I'm going to have some, well, we can do this. We can do this. But some comments from Tiknot Han. And the first thing, for those of you who don't know, he's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, a peace activist, and a refugee of the war in Vietnam. And right now, even just listening to what we've been listening to and what's going on and turning on the news every day, I am angry. And I spent my whole career angry as a deputy public defender. I never knew when I would have to face some police officer themselves, some judge, some situation, And all of those things that Dr. Tibbs mentioned, and all of those things that you said is true. I'm not an academic. I was a foot soldier. And when Black Lives Matter, when BLM became a thing, I would tell all of my friends, well, I represent the ones that they don't kill. So all of this that we see in the news is only the tip of the iceberg from what goes on each and every day in each and every criminal courtroom, in each and every county, all across the United States. And sometimes I would tell myself, as Dr. Tibbs says, how could I go on with this? How could I go on with this? But we get up, and I have a coworker who's on this call with me. They thought we were the same person. We get up each and every day, and it is a fight. But over the years, I have learned some techniques and some practices to help us. But before I get beyond myself, what I meant to say, I didn't mean to have this one right up, but we can do this as a group now before we go on with more of Dr. Tibbs' presentation. But the first thing I really wanted to say is that mindfulness is not an escape from your anger. And Tiknot Han, I wanted to quote something that he said. He said, "We do not produce mindfulness to chase away or fight our anger, but to take good care of it." And that means when we are acknowledging it, when we're acknowledging our grief, when we're acknowledging our weariness, that can give us a chance, both especially personally and as a group, to take a breath and see things clearly. I think Dr. Tibbs, all of your instincts are right about how we need to take care of ourselves in order, to be able to survive and to go on. And they often say there are certain practices under the umbrella of mindfulness. You know, people have said that, when you're on the front line of someone else's suffering, you have to learn how to take care of yourself. And as lawyers, even if you're not a criminal defense lawyer, you're an agent for somebody else. So you're on the front line of someone else's suffering. Plus, you have your own reaction to that and how to, de-traumatize yourself from whatever you're facing. But particularly in this instance, and particularly if you are Black or brown, being able to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others, so that you can make a contribution, it's very important. Uh, as was noted in a bit of my background, I come from Southern California. I grew up in Compton. I stayed in Southern California. I practiced in Compton. I had the unique opportunity of seeing classmates and family members come through the lockup. I had the and 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 just people that all of these cases that are in the news, they happen every day where they don't kill them. I had somebody serve a search warrant because her third nephew once lived there, and pull her out in her panties with heads, guns drawn. I had clients shot in the back, and they lived, and yet they were charged. And that was just me. I was only one person. No, in the course of a practice. You talk about Fourth Amendment, or you talk about right. I mean, and on the ground level, when we were watching in the courtroom, and again, Dr. Tibbs is right, and there was this great big hoo-ha that now they're coming in, police are testifying against each other, and that is true. But the reason that it's so important is because the public, the citizen, the Black citizen in particular, the brown citizen in particular, and my Hispanic clients used to laugh at me when I would tell them brown lives matter too, because they would come in with the same thing where I live. And it's like, you don't exist. Your words mean nothing. Your version of any happenings means nothing. And the judges would actually, from the bench, like I said, these are not the famous cases, these are the day-to-day cases. The judges from the bench would actually excoriate me and say, how could you dare put this fine police officer's career in jeopardy by saying that he's lying? And the district attorneys would stand up and say to the jurors, and why would they lie? What motive do they have to lie? When it was such a common occurrence that there's a word in the parlance called test the line, or you would see the police come in and say to the prosecutors right before the court proceedings, well, what do you need me to say? What do you need me to say? And they didn't, and on the occasions that I did win the trials, I remember seeing a juror in the local McDonald's who apparently must have swung the jury for me. She goes, and they were asking me, and this was early in my career, just why are you so angry? Why are you angry? But the unfortunate thing is that although I was a meditator for a long time, I didn't have the tools of mindfulness. I didn't have the psychology part of it. I meditate primarily for religious reasons, but as you meditate, you find that they all kind of coalesce at one point when you need to take care of yourself. And that's not only when I had the opportunity to take the mindfulness and law teacher training, um, which is given by someone who is on this call, Judy Cohen. And I mentioned you, Judy, because someone asked in particular, they didn't know that there was an intersection. I think her name is Kimberly Bell, so I referred her to you, but that's an aside. But I didn't find that till much later. And I was really on my last legs. It was like 5 or 6 years before I was going to retire from the public defender's office. And I don't know, all of you people are, most of you are young, but if you're getting ready to retire, the last 5 years, you don't know how you can get through it. But what happened was that I learned, like I said, to first of all, acknowledge our anger. We have to acknowledge our grief. We have to acknowledge that it's not just us that we're dealing with us. We have to acknowledge that there are groups like this or people like this around the world. There is an interconnectedness, and that there is a humanity. And maybe I'm a little biased, but yesterday I got to see one of the prosecutors, Jerry Blackwell, on a television show speaking about it, speaking about actually trying the Derek Chauvin case. And I happen to know a little bit about his background and his beliefs, but what he said and what we have to hang on to here is that it is a humanitarian problem. This appeals to all of our humanity. And that's where, if you are going to practice, if you are going to take in and be able to go on, that you're going to have to take care of yourself and realize that you're not in this alone, not just Black people, not just brown people, not just lawyers, but all people. And mindfulness, you know, as they say in mindfulness, the burden doesn't get lighter, but the bat gets stronger. And that's what we're hoping to show you, that in answer to all the questions that Dr. Tibbs has, that yes, there is something. Um, Now, Simone, I guess we can go through this common practice. I had envisioned it at the end, but we could do it now because I think I need a little unwinding myself.
Well, we can do it at the end, or we can switch it on. We can do it now, or go to Dr. Tibbs. It's entirely up to you, whatever's easiest.
Well, I would prefer to do it at the end because then we could leave ourselves with a kind of peace after we discuss it. But in the meantime, I just want to tell you that in terms of a definition of mindfulness, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, there are different, you know, kinds of mind. There's four foundations of mindfulness. Some have you reach it through exercises with the breath or with the body. And I had hoped to do that, but that's kind of hard because I wanted to do like a body scan and then we would all fall asleep and that would be good. But why that's not good. But what's important for lawyers and why I think a breath or a body-based practice, and these are things that you can learn to do to carry with you during the day, what they call portable. Because as I said, I would be confronted with issues and not know what to expect. Sometimes I would go into court and I would know that I was going to have a hard day. I would know I was trying a capital murder case. But other times I would go into court and have, like one time I went into court and the cops were late. And the judge dismissed the case because they weren't there. So they come in, and these were big California Highway Patrolmen who are the nicer cops. They had on big Gestapo looking boots, and they're about 6 foot tall, 6 feet tall, each of them. And, you know, I'm 5'4" maybe. And they come in and they tell the judge, well, we were here, we were late. I'm standing at the door, and I know they came in 15 minutes late. And I was a baby PD, and I stood up and I drew myself up, and I never forget it because I was so scared. And I said, you're lying, you were not here. You were not here. And so I would have days like that when I wouldn't expect it. So that's why we build up a mindfulness practice, because we build in ourselves a reservoir for when things do happen. And that we build in ourselves, or we have techniques that all of us know a little. We can take a breath, we can center ourselves, we can get a space to give ourselves some clarity. And that's why it's so wonderful. I went to law school a long time ago, and we didn't have anything like this. So, you know, to have classes in actual law schools and have multiple organizations that foster that. So what mindfulness is the intentional moment to moment awareness without judgment, so that you can think and you can react wisely and appropriately. Like I said, I don't speak from the big picture of different litigations. You know, I speak from the position of being out in the world and a foot soldier. So, you know, you're just trying to hang on. So back to you, Dr. Tibbs.
And I think that's so important. And I think, you know, with hearing your entire journey, really, it's an example of strengthening your proverbial bat. And it is so important for everyone here to strengthen their own proverbial bat and just step into just adopting simple mindfulness practices throughout their daily lives, because it is so important for us to survive and be able to go on. When you were mentioning that, you know, the juror asked you, why are you so angry? What came to my mind was when Solange had her song Mad on a Seat at the Table album. And, you know, she's saying we have a lot to be mad about and just asking these questions. But even with your story, that song, you know, it directly captures what we face simply by being Black in this country. So we have that residual burden as the remnants of slavery via epigenetics, and along with what we see and experience in our everyday lives. So it's so important to be able to just adopt these practices to begin to de-traumatize ourselves and just release that burden off of our shoulders. So, Dr. Tibbs, I'm going to now swap you out with Bella. And I have a few questions that, just based on, today's topic, as well as your story, your journey, and the things that you've been able to discuss so far here today. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the desensitization that we develop from watching, in live time, our people being violently murdered by the state, and then subsequently also seeing in live time the lack of justice being served.
Sure. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much. And great to follow up behind Bella. Such a superstar. Such an amazing story and just a warrior. I appreciate it. Um, so this is a part of our reality, right? This is, I think, a part of our journey. This is the experience that we have, the internalization of these deaths and of these murders as we watch them in real time, or we watch them be played over and over again, is something that we can't escape. There is no such thing as a Black privilege, right? Like, we just don't have the privilege to feel nothing as it pertains to these things. So how does watching these events over and over again desensitize us? And what does it mean to watch these events in real time, and even then to take them in, consistently in repeated news events, right? And I guess, I think a lot about the desensitization part of it. I don't find that I ever get there. I don't get desensitized. What ends up happening to me, Simone, is I get more and more angry. Right. I find myself, right, like, if anyone else is having this experience for me, experience signified for me, because I find myself screaming at the television. I find myself like raising my voice when I'm answering questions for family and friends. I just find myself so incredibly outraged by it all. But there is perhaps a way in which maybe there's some aspect of me being desensitized that is occurring maybe tacitly rather than explicitly. I know you have moments, and they've also, there's been done tons of studies that have done that says, part of the training for the military in terms of desensitization regarding homicides is to play really violent video games, right? Where you just get used to shooting and killing people over and over again. And I don't know that I find myself being desensitized to what I'm experiencing in terms of internalizing and watching these events. But I do find myself being desensitized in terms of the response, right? The response that I think should be occurring. So I had a really interesting and external experience watching the storming of the US Capitol on January 6th, right? And to watch that and to say, well, wait a minute, if these are Black people, the guns would be drawn and people would be shot dead on the scene. And then wondering, why isn't that happening right now? Why aren't they shooting and killing these rioters? Why aren't they take their guns out and shoot them and kill them, right? Like, that is a desensitization, right? That is me internally experiencing the anti-Blackness in policing, and to see the way that protesters with Black Lives Matters occurs and how they police that, and then to watch on the other side and to see them not only not do the same thing, but do something considerably less. For example, taking selfies with these rioters. And even if you all remember when the news events began with this, they were referring to them as protesters, right? And I tweeted to CNN and say, not protesters, not the right word to call them, right? This is, if there's ever a time to want to say, rioters or thugs, if there's ever a time you've ever wanted to use that language, this would be the time. But it's almost as if there was a certain verbial deference that was afforded to white individuals who are engaging in this riot, right? This storming of the Capitol that isn't afforded to Black protesters who are actually protesting those very individuals who are out in the street beating them down for protesting. So, how are we experiencing this over and over again? And what is it doing to us explicitly? What is it doing to us tacitly? How is that trauma sort of constantly occurring? And I honestly got to a point in terms of my own I was being sensitized and also desensitized. I had to stop taking it in. I just had to stop taking it in. There's certain things that I can't control, right? I can't control what happens out in the streets, but I can control how many hours I watch of it on CNN. I can't control how many hours I read on Twitter, right? I can't control what I watch on TikTok or some of the other social media platforms. And the reality is that sometimes to get to, right, the thing that I might actually enjoy, for example, on Twitter, which is the really ingenious responses sometimes that people give. That's the thing that I really enjoy. But to get to that, you have to walk through the trauma of the thing that they're actually referring to, right, or they're actually responding to. The same thing on TikTok with watching videos of police violence over and over and over again, and racism being spewed at Black people in the military, Black people who are professionals, just black everyday Black life, right? Black, brown, Muslim, as I talked about before. So I found that I had to stop. I just had to cut back. I had to pull back to the degree. Listen, I make no bones about it. I'm a huge CNN fan. Like, I love Anderson Cooper. I absolutely do. I think he's phenomenal. And then I love Chris Cuomo. It's a different energy. And then I can't wait to get to Don Lemon because I know it's going to be, seriously, come on, man, really? Right? I know that those experiences are going to occur. But then I also had to realize that I was watching the same story being played over and over and over again. And then after you do the 8, 9, 10 rotation, then there is an 11 midnight, 1 o'clock rotation, just in case you missed the 8, 9, 10 rotation. That is literally 6 hours that you can watch these events. And that's just one channel. That doesn't include if you flip over to Rachel Maddow, or if you flip over to Fox News, just because you want to hear what they're saying or because you follow Fox News. And it doesn't include the time during the commercials that you're in your Twitter feed. It doesn't include the times that when you walk away and go get something out of the kitchen, you're looking at something else. So we are taking it in, right? We are drinking. We are literally drinking the blood of violence and putting it into our spirituality. We are injecting it directly into our bodies through our own sensitive, right? Our senses, our eyes, our ears, our smell, like the things that make us who we are as humans, the things that give us our greatest connection to the world, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we experience. We are putting poison into it constantly, right? And when there's no release for it on the other side, right? So when you put poison into your body, it only one way to get it out. You have to find a way to release it from your body and release it from your spirit. But when there's no release, that means you're taking it in, you're taking it in, you're taking it in. And if I've learned anything in terms of my own sort of spiritual base and how I try to think about governing my own life, I've learned that you can take things in, but they're going to come out, right? And the more that you take them in and you hold them down, right, all it does is it makes it worse for you internally. And this is where illness comes from. This is where high blood pressure comes from. You know, if you're someone like me, I'm a stress eater. So when I get stressed, I turn to snacks. So now I'm putting stress into my spirit, which is making me run to the kitchen every 5 minutes, right? And now I'm eating cookies and chips and things of that nature, which will increase weight, which will add to diabetes, those things that we're sort of constantly trying to stay away from. And they're one of the few releases you can have, obviously, is to get exercise, right? That is one of the true releases. And eat healthier. That is another release. But I'm proposing a different release in terms of helping how we might become desensitized to what we're doing to ourselves, which is to just find a way to get it in without taking it all in. So, you know, I watch very limited newscast segments. I won't watch all 3 hours on CNN, you know, and I try to unplug from my telephone. You know, I will go hours without looking at my telephone. People will text me and I won't answer them for 3 or 4 hours. And just because I'm not connected to these devices that are just inundating me with this, the ways in which these events are occurring over and over and over and over again. And it's gotten so bad now that I have students, they contact me, they reach out and they say, hey, you know, I want to do a paper on, you know, on race and policing. Do you have any ideas where I can begin? And I just tell them, just wait. Just don't do anything. Just wait, because in a matter of a couple of days, you'll have a story to talk about. And that is a sad testament to where we are. But I also realize that that's a sad testament to a certain type of cynicism that I'm developing related to being involved in this topic. So how can I be a better version of myself? I know that one of the things that has been encouraged to me from, you know, talking to a therapist about these kind of things, which is learning to be present in your own life, right? Learning to be there, learning to sit with it, not run away from it, be present, sit with it, be comfortable with it, and let it pass through you. So that is something that I'm constantly working on. And that's why I was so excited to be invited today. And I remember telling Professor Semino, my good friend Chapin, when we discussed this, I was like, man, I've got to get over there to, you know, you mindfulness folks. You've got this, you are in the right path. I'm over here with all the angry crim law, crim pro folks who are constantly talking about these things. And I need to be someplace where I'm finding balance, right? Where I'm finding peace in all of this so that I can continue to be a voice in the struggle without flying off the handle, because no one likes an angry Black man, but you can't help but be an angry Black man when they're constantly making you angry, right? This is sort of what Bella's point is that people they look at your anger as a problem rather than turning internally to themselves and saying that they are the source of the anger that they are creating. So that's sort of that's a really long answer, Simone. I apologize. I told you I can get a little yappy about these things. A really long answer to thinking about how to desensitize from this. The short answer of that is take in less, right? You're not really missing out on the larger narrative related to the stories. It won't be a whole lot different. There'll just be a few facts that will actually change. But when you have these sort of Black deaths, and there's killings by police officers, the narrative is going to stretch for a while. There's a lot to come. I know my law students, you understand there's no decisions get made right away. There's a whole story and a whole narrative that's going to actually develop. And so sometimes you have to even just give it time to allow itself to shake out. It's not saying that, I'm not saying you can't react to it immediately. I'm not saying you can't find it outrageous immediately. It's just that you are better off if you take a little bit less in, you save a little bit of yourself for yourself and do something good for that little smaller version of you. One of my sort of favorite lessons in mindfulness was to think about the little boy in me, right? If I had a son and little small son and he was really sad, what would I do to take care of that smaller version of me? Well, that makes me ask myself, what are the things that make me happy? What can I do in the moments that I feel uncomfortable or unhappy? What can I do to give something good, do something good for myself? As we talked about a little bit before, I like to have ice cream. So I know I would get that little boy and I would take him out to get an ice cream cone. So why not do the same thing for this big guy, right? This bigger version of myself. That is, in my opinion, a mindfulness technique, because it is recognizing that I am sad and there perhaps is a way to deal with the reality of that sadness rather than sink into depression. So I hope that answers the question a little bit for you, Simone. Once again, I know that was really, really windy. I'm a yapper.
So many important aspects, and not only did you touch on the constant feeding of information, but how to essentially self-regulate that, and also reflecting on your inner child and how to cater to that as well. There's one thing I really want to focus on was you said that you constantly found yourself getting angrier and angrier. One thing I learned, and this was from a speaker that I had the opportunity to meet during my 1L year during Northeastern's Daynard lecture series, but she's she essentially taught me how to think about, instead of thinking about it as anger, more so think about it as righteous indignation,
Mhm.
because we have the historical remnants that have continuously carried on, really one can say, since we were illegally brought to this country
Yes.
and forced here. So with thinking about those things, I think it's so important to, note that it is okay to have this righteous indignation and to
Mhm.
recognize why you have it. But also within that, how do you incorporate mindfulness into that and making sure that while, yes, you are staying aware, you are also protecting yourself.
That's
And so
right.
in that same essence, I think I'm going to hand it over to Bella to lead us in our last mindfulness exercise before we enter into a Q&A.
Well, just let me, I would like to make some comments to what Dr. Tibbs said. I mean, they just can't go unanswered because they're answers to what he said, and the mindfulness answers. And first of all, about the desensitization, I mean, nobody has it like public defenders. We have all kind of gallows humor. I mean, we could laugh at anything because you have to go on. We would, we'd have an arson and there'd be like fireman's crispy critter humor. So you do that to survive. But that being said, the actual mindfulness answer to that, mindfulness is a quality of mind that is deeply aware of what happened, is what is happening now. And you give yourself that space in that moment so that you have the space to react. So when the answer, you don't, some people say, I don't want to meditate, I don't want to practice mindfulness or indulge in these things because I don't want to be desensitized. Because you're right, desensitization is not the answer. But you, at the same time, when you are aware from moment to moment, that gives you space to know what you're going to do, to make a decision, like I said, to strengthen your back, and you turn toward that. So and perhaps what you're facing, it doesn't change what you're actually facing, but it changes your footing towards what you're actually facing. um Also, you're talking about taking in things. I'm there's an exercise that's based on a practice. It's I believe well, it's called Tonglen, but mindfully speaking, when you talk about CNN, I'm even worse than that because at least CNN has news from time to time. I watch a constant diet of MSNBC. I only want the opinions. I only want people to say what I would say. And I watch it over. And you're right, it's a constant loop. But when there is a practice, and I'm only going to mention it, but this is something you can do at home when you're taking in all of this, or it's just too much. If you can stop and recognize that you're an overload, or if it's something that's too hard to bear, and you feel that you just don't want to take it, and for self-preservation and to give to the bigger world, you it's the breathing in and breathing out. And if you can just kind of quiet yourself and you can imagine, you know, you have the time you've just heard about the latest shooting or about them withholding body cams, and you sit and you thinking, you think about the family of these people, you think about yourself, you think about, you know, Black people in America driving while Black, and you ground yourself and you think, breathing in, you're taking it in, like you said, because you're taking it in anyway. You know, you're breathing in the pain of an individual, the collective pain, and then you're breathing out love. That is getting it out. Like I said, it's a more technical process. There's another name for it. But basically speaking, since you're taking it in anyway, you know that you are expelling it through your breath. And you could do that without anybody even knowing, because I have done that standing in courtrooms in front of clerk's office, clerk's desk. You know, you breathe in the pain of others, you breathe in the suffering of others, and you realize that this you're suffering and you're breathing it in. And then you breathe out love, you breathe out healing. And that gives you a way not only to address it in yourself, but you know that you're contributing, because that's we do have to feel that what we do as individuals, what we do in our private practice makes a difference in the world collectively. It's our interconnectedness. Because if we felt that whatever we did, you know, if I felt in that little bitty courtroom with that one client that what did for years or what I was doing did not make a global difference, then, you know, why do everything? Because you're right, like one good verdict, one good charging of police, one person not being killed, what is that? But it does, you know, it helps you to be able to take agency within your own self, your own spiritual, your own mental health. I've heard mindfulness described as a seatbelt for your mind. It's a mental health tool. So you can do that when you feel that you're taking too much in. You can expel it as goodness. You can expel it as love. You can expel it as healing. And then you know that you're not just limited to doing nothing. In that time, in that moment, you not only are attending to yourself, but you can take the belief as if one would in a prayer, that you're giving that healing, that love, that righteousness, that justice. You know, I breathe in injustice, I breathe out righteousness, I breathe out healing, I breathe out justice. And even though this is something you're only voicing to yourself, um, it it's the start for you to be able to act in bigger venues. Okay, so that's with the taking too much news in, because I do. And you're right, I turn it off sometime too. Usually, thank you, Simone. This I submitted and I put this together based on, you know, when you're in trial, like if you had the chance to watch the trial, you see the lawyers constantly writing or constantly taking notes or constantly reviewing. For a lot of time in some of my more trying trials, as to say, I was reading and going over something like this. I kind of, I, you know, I cobbled it together from other sources, but for this moment, uh, I I shaped it into something that we could use and practice collectively. I'd like you all now to sit back, and if you want to, you can close your eyes because I'll be reciting it. Start by taking a breath. Notice that you're breathing, and notice that you're breathing out. If you have anger, notice that you're angry. If you have any kind of grief or fear, you can notice that too. And as Tiknot Han said, if you have anger, acknowledge your anger. This is a moment of suffering. May our suffering be eased. May our suffering cease. May our pain be eased. May we turn towards this difficulty with care. May we be free from pain. May we be free from suffering. This is a moment of suffering. May our suffering be eased. May our suffering cease. May our pain be eased. May we turn toward this difficulty with care. May we be free from pain. May we be free from suffering. If your suffering is really intense, you and you have the opportunity, you could put your hand on your heart. If you're alone, if you're in a public space, you think that to yourself, you can hold your hands or hold your fingers. But mindfulness begins with acknowledging it and taking care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was so needed. And I know for me personally, and I hope for everyone else, that you just felt a little bit of the daily burden that you carry alleviated. So now I'm going to open the floor for Q&A. I just dropped in the chat the 5 mutual agreements that everyone in this space should adhere to. I just want to remind everyone just to be respectful of this space, and especially because it's such a sensitive topic, to not only maintain your respect but acknowledge the 5 agreements, and feel comfortable to ask your question. This is a safe space, so if you would like to verbally ask your question, you can use the raise hand function and ask it yourself, or you can write it in the chat and I can ask it for you. Don't be shy. Yes, Ronaldo.
Hi, everyone, and Ashe, and I respect everyone that's here. And thank you so much for everything that you guys have given so far. One of the issues that I guess like I'm dealing with as a law student is being African American and looking and representing the laws that sometimes is deemed unfair to to us, but representing those same laws all the time. And I'm trying to find out if there's a way that someone has been able to deal with that or been able to squash that within themselves, because you do look at the trial and you are holding your breath and you're saying, I see the injustice, but I also see the law at the same time. How how do you put that at ease within your spirit? If anyone else here could answer that.
Well, I know for me and the kind of practice I had, that happened all the time. And I wouldn't really suggest you handle it the way I did, because I've been threatened with arrest several times. I've, been fined. Uh, but I think that's something that each one of us, like you said, it's everybody appears on this earth and your public face is different. And you can only do what you are comfortable and true to. I know that I represented clients that I saw as myself. And there were absolutely times when the laws were unjust. And to my credit, even though I didn't get a chance to argue it, I had a case go all the way up to the Supreme Court, because and we won. um, Even though the law is the same, but I will have to give our trainers at the LA County office, because we have this one guy who he's still, and he would say, even if the law is against you and it sounds wrong, if it sounds wrong to you, if it sounds unfair, you stand up for it, because there is this one thing about the law. Most times there is a structure in the law where it is appealed. So you stay true to yourself. You express what you think is wrong. You make a record. That's what we always do. You have to make your record. And that's all that you can do. That's all you could do, is to just show up in life and make your record.
And
Thank you so much for that.
Ronaldo, thank you for that question. That was an absolutely fabulous question, and thanks, Bella, for the response. From the perspective of someone who's training you in the law, from a law professor's perspective, I often have this experience with students who are struggling with just really like concepts that seem to sort of fly in the face of Blackness. Conversations about civil rights and constitutional law, or looking at how we analyze reasonableness in tort law, right? Who is the reasonable person? It was a reasonable man when I was in law school. They've tried to do a little bit better with it, by at least making it a reasonable person, but we still know that it still fits sort of the same paradigm. How do we look at possible explanations for property crimes and criminal law, where some of your classmates may say, yeah, well, you just have to send everybody to prison, without recognizing that property crimes flow from a lack of income, a lack of education, a lack of opportunity, right? Like, so there's these experiences, I think, in law school where you as a Black person and you as a Black man are really like internally experiencing the injustice. Let me say this differently: the whiteness, right? The white supremacy, the old white traditional male supremacy that is present in the law, in the legal system, and gets replicated in the books that you then are taught you then are taught from. One of the things that I think you could do is probably a two-step thing that I would sort of offer as my piece of advice. First, congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back for your lack of awareness with realizing, right, that something about this analysis doesn't work for everybody. Something about this law, the way that it treats and intersects with Black people, doesn't work, right? So recognizing that you're seeing a difference is actually a really good thing. It means that you are aware, you are woke, right? And that's the sort of mindset that you want to bring to the table. And then try to find that faculty member. There always is at least one. I've been at several institutions where there's often more than one that you can just kind of go and sit down and vibe with and say, hey, I had this experience in contracts today, or, I'm not really sure how much racism we see in civil procedure, but hey, in civil procedure today, and my classmates said this, and I just felt like that was wrong, right? And oftentimes that professor, that one that you draw that connection with, that you are sort of tacitly asking to become a mentor to you, will talk you through it and work with you on it. It's not about how to find the immediate solution as much as it is right now recognizing the problem and recognizing the issues that are occurring. So kudos for you for acknowledging it. Kudos to you for recognizing it. And so maybe that next step may be to find yourself to those like-minded individuals that can be helpful to you in terms of you finding that release of that experience. I was talking to a young lady, an African-American young lady yesterday, and she was telling me that, she has these friends in law school, and she finds herself constantly fighting with them about racism, like that they just don't accept it. They don't think that Black people have problems, things of those kinds of statements. And I sort of had to ask her, well, wait a minute, like, so why exactly are they your friends? I'm trying to understand, like, why are you putting yourself in this space where you're exhausting yourself constantly to sort of deal with this inability to recognize who you are, to add value to who you are in those present moments. And I encouraged her to seek out like-minded people on campus, to seek out other students, to seek out organizations, to seek out professors, to seek out things in the community that really keep you deeply connected to who you are and your experiences of the law. There's only so many ways that I can teach you stop and frisk. There's no way for me to teach stop and frisk to you without having a conversation about racism in this country. But if I was to teach stop and frisk without acknowledging that this is something that Black people experience specifically under the Fourth Amendment, if I was to do that in my classroom, your recognition that I am leaving that conversation out is good for you. Right? And you may not be able to get the professor to take on that issue because maybe they aren't so comfortable, but there's tons of people on the campus that you can reach out to. So I guess what I'm essentially saying is that you can't avoid the whiteness and the white supremacy in the law itself and in your legal education because it's so deeply embedded in there. But you can find ways to connect with the right kinds of people on campus, with the right organizations, with the right community. Find your group, man, find your network, and be beholden to that community because that's where you belong. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense to and provides a halfway decent answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tibbs. That provides a huge answer to my question. It's just that constantly seeing it written in the law and then swearing to uphold that same law, and you're looking at yourself in that duality. And I kind of like it to the people that lived in Louisiana during Katrina, where, the city sees it come down here and party, but you're still looking at communities that have been torn apart. So that constant duality is a fight that I guess as a student that I go through every day. So thank you so much for that. And I will utilize both of your advices.
Right on. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you.
So I think that was the perfect question and answer to help close out our program. Thank you all so much, so much for being with us today and engaging in this really important conversation, as well as learning just how to incorporate mindfulness into your daily practice. We hope that you will attend future NBLSA events, as well as our upcoming events with the Mindfulness and Law Society. We have an upcoming event in May. So you will receive an event notification for that in a few weeks, in a few weeks. This recording will be available shortly after the close of this session, and it will be available on our YouTube, the Mindfulness and Law Society's website, as well as sent out to all participants. For those that are engaging in finals, like myself, I wish you the best of luck. And again, thank you so much for joining us.